Yeah, I mean, that's when I used to go watch them. I was younger at the time and I would go watch them there, and there was always young kids, which I think is cool. Like, not to get all philosophical about ska music, but I think there's a place for everything, right? Like, I always say our scene in Orange County is like very accepting. I would say the scene overall is very accepting of all different kinds of people and ages. And there's happy ska for when you're happy, and there's serious ska for when you want to be serious, and, you know, everything in between.
It's been a very long time since I've been out to, I mean, to be fair, it's been a long time since I've been out to a show, period, for obvious pandemic related reasons, but it's been a longer time since I've been out to a ska show specifically. When I used to go back as a youth, it was all, you know, it was a very sort of young scene, but given that a lot of the bands, yours certainly included, feature some, you know, older members, is the audience maturing with the bands?
Yes and no. So I feel like there's not a ton of young kids like flocking to live music in general, I would say. Young people in general, you know, like 20 and under, aren't really flocking to live music in general. There's so much competition just for eyeballs now, right? You have like social media and streaming, and there's just like a lot. I could just be like an old person talking here, and I don't really know. I'm not a teenager. But I feel like it's not that you can still be social with your friends online. Like when I was younger, you went to shows to be social and see other people and your friends and stuff. And I feel like there's just not as much of that going on. So with ska, I think kids are finding it online, which is super cool. And we're all sort of making this effort to sort of, you know, be online more. And I know like some bands like Catbite are like really strong on Twitter and TikTok, and I'm trying with TikTok. I'm not great at it, but, you know, we try with like YouTube and Instagram and things like that. So I think they're finding it more online. As far as like at a show, it's usually, there are some younger people there, but a lot of it is like parents bringing their younger kids. But then that turns into those kids bringing their friends, which is cool. And then you start to get more and more. But I'm curious post-pandemic what it's going to be like. People have been in their houses so long. Maybe kids now are like, oh, screw the iPhone. I do want to go see people.
I work at a site called TechCrunch, and I've been writing a fair bit about some of these people trying to do live event streaming. You know, obviously it was something that was big during the pandemic. And the question is, if and when people start returning to venues, whether or not that's going to continue to be a thing, whether or not people are still going to be interested in watching things remotely.
Yeah, I feel like there is a big push in the industry, like more broadly, to keep that going because it's easier. You don't have to put out as much cost. You know, if you could do one live show somewhere in like a stadium, you're like whoever, Ariana Grande, you could do it in a stadium one time, but then broadcast it all over. Or like Blake Shelton did with the drive-ins. I feel like they want to push for that because that's easier. Like there's a way less overhead. But I don't think it will ever replace like the true feeling, right, of a live show. But I don't know, maybe the wider audience at large, people who aren't really super into music, they might be like, oh, cool, I'm going to watch Elton John or whatever.
To be fair, you mentioned Ariana Grande, Elton John, Blake Shelton. We're talking fairly different scales here.
No, for sure. I mean, we do like Twitch twice a week, and that people are into that. So I think there is demand for access and seeing you and in more intimate ways. Like Twitch is a lot more intimate, and community building, at least from what we've seen, which is really cool. Like we have like a pretty active Discord, and like there's like a lot of community there, and everyone's super cool, and people build friendships and things like that. I think that's sort of cool, but I don't know about seeing a live concert, but, you know, streaming it. But maybe it's just because I would rather go see it live. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of bands doing that now that live shows are a thing.
Intimate is an interesting word, you know, in the context of Twitch. Do you mean specifically intimate because it's your bands and not in the context of a larger event? Or do you feel like sort of part of adapting to social media is just kind of offering up more of yourself and sides of yourself that you wouldn't necessarily see in a more traditional model?
The latter. For sure. And I think with Twitch, like there's an intimacy in the fact that like people are in the chat talking to you and you're responding live. I always joke and say it's like playing a show, but the audience is screaming at you and you have to like answer them.
To be fair, that sounds horrible.
No, but I really enjoy it because I've gotten to actually like make friends through like legit people I consider friends like through this. And I think that it's cool. And I think other people have made friends. I mean, with our show we're going to play here in next month, like fans are flying in who are subs to our Twitch and they're hooking up and staying together and getting an Airbnb. You know, like people are like building a community. And I think that's really cool. But yes, I think also with social media and then the constant need to create content, because if you're not constantly creating, you sort of just get brushed over and forgotten. You do have to give up more of yourself just because like for me, that's the way you fit it into your day. Like there just aren't enough hours to constantly be like churning stuff out. Like I've started posting like Instagram stories when I don't makeup on. Like I would never, that sounds vain as hell, but I would never do that before. But now I'm like, we just have to get it out there. And I'm like, well, these people have seen me be sweaty and this and that, like whatever.
I'm sure like after a marathon show, you're probably looking pretty rough, like regardless.
Yeah. What are you talking about? I look amazing. No, yeah, for sure. My lipstick is always just everywhere and I can't seem to like avoid it.
It's not a good show if you're not like a complete hot mess by the end of it.
That's what I think. I feel like y'all didn't get your money's worth if I'm not all sweaty and gross.
I don't know if vulnerability is the right word, but does that kind of thing come naturally to you? I talk to a lot of bands who would prefer some kind of mystique and aren't necessarily doing a good job of adapting to a world where they do have to pull back the curtain to some degree.
I am a very open person. Sometimes like it's not good. Like I'm the friend that like is bad at keeping people's secrets. Like I tell people I'm feeling all the time. It's not always great. So I think for me, it doesn't bother me as much. We're very lucky. We have a small community, you know, like in comparison to other people. And so far everyone's like super cool. And I think it's harder when people are demanding of you. But like so far I haven't had like a lot of people be very demanding or like needing a lot. You know what I mean? Like there's been articles going around, like industry articles about how some fans are like giving out like a phone number and you can like text them. Like to me, that might be a little much. Like it's just, you know, because there's just not enough time to give people like attention and things like that. And sometimes people do like really just want your attention all the time. And I try to be nice because like obviously this person is like needing something, needing community and like love in their life. And so you're just trying to like, you know, be nice. But it doesn't feel strange to me to be so open with people. Like, to me, it's just like having more friends.
How was your mental health throughout the last like year and a half?
That's a tricky question. If you're talking about the pandemic, I fared pretty okay. I had a really big, I would call, I guess, personal tragedy right before the pandemic started. So that was like, I think that made my quarantine a little bit harder. But also it forced me to grieve, which was kind of good because I probably would have shoved it under the rug and just like kept trucking and been like, you know, we had all these tours planned.
You think that the pandemic, just the fact that you had to sort of take a moment and pause because there's nothing else going on, afforded you the opportunity to really reflect on the horror?
Yes. And I think in a way that was good because I kind of got all the grieving out at the front. Like, you know, a lot of times I tell people who like are suffering a loss, I go like grief is like a box and like you can open it today and you can deal with it for a couple hours, then you have to shut it. But because we had nowhere to go, I sort of just opened it and I sat in it and it was horrible. And then I sort of, I think, worked through it a little faster than I might have if I'd come home and been like, okay, now we're going to play like shows and we're going to go on this tour with Real Big Fish and the Aquabats and we're doing this and this. I don't know if I would have worked through it as much and so I don't know, maybe it was healthier. Maybe it was like ripping off a Band-Aid. I don't know.
Obviously this is purely hypothetical and, you know, God forbid anything of that nature ever happens again. But I mean, do you think you could have just got on stage and played with the Aquabats that soon after something like that happened?
Yes, because you sort of compartmentalize in a way. Like I could still like do my life. I noticed if we're being like, look, this is all honest and intimate here. Look, see, this is the thing. I can never shut up. No, like I would be okay until I was like with people, like if we were drinking, then all of a sudden it was all I wanted to talk about and I was not fun to be around for a little bit. And that's when I was like, okay, you gotta like work through this. You can't just I had a friend be like, are you sure you don't need to go to therapy? And I was like, oh, I'm not shutting up about it all the time. But when I get to bring it up with things, you know, I've sort of channeled it into my band persona in a way, and that I'm much more aware of the issue of suicide. And it's a really big issue in our country, especially of young people. And so I like that I can, try and make that a point to tell people that, like, you can always talk to me. Like, I'll talk to anybody about it. Like, if you feel alone, like, you're not, like, I'll be your friend, and I think that's what's cool, like, with community building in a band, is like there's people you can reach out to and stuff like that.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was the broad spectrum of not just styles, but themes that fall under the larger banner of ska music as a genre that at its heart and its origin is very much it's dance music, it's escapist music, and certainly a lot of what you do falls into that. I mean, do you think that what you do as a band affords you the opportunity to potentially tackle something that big and dark and dramatic in music?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call ska escapist, in that if we go back to, like, rocksteady and like 60s ska, like there's a lot of like colonialism being discussed, and then in two tone you get a lot of like racism being discussed and colonialism being discussed there. I think the escapist ska sort of comes in third wave ska, quote unquote.
That's fair thematically. Generally, musically, I consider it to be a genre where it's like, people are living very hard lives in Jamaica, going out and dancing to a sound system, and it's something that they can do on like weekends to like escape that difficulty.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, I think sometimes too the songs sound like happy and peppy, but like lyrically they can be darker. So I get your point. Anyway, sorry, I just like getting into the weeds there. But no, to answer your question, yeah, we've been working on a song that is sort of addressing that issue. We haven't finished it. I think part of it is every time I try, it's hard for me. And I know, like, it's, again, opening that box, right? Like, it's kind of hard. We've been working on that. We try to use the messaging, and like we're teaming up with this charity called Punk Rock Saves Lives, and they like try to help people find mental health services. So like we have them come out to our shows, and I just try to be a big like, hey, remind people, like, hey, check on your friends. I try to tell people, hey, if you're feeling alone, like here's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Or because I do think right now is a scary time for all of us in the world, in that people have been isolated. There's a lot of like overdose deaths. There's a lot of suicide. And I think the hardest part is, like I said, the numbers amongst young children are just like so high. And so if they can find community and maybe some quote unquote escapism in the music, that we like to sort of push friendship and you're not alone and things like that.
Has songwriting been that release valve, or been a source of catharsis for you, or at the very least, a way of sort of dealing with not this topic necessarily, but just issues in your life generally?
Yeah, it is. But those songs rarely get recorded.
Why is that?
Because I think sometimes in Bite Me Bambi as a project, like people don't want to hear like my sadness, in a way. And so I think like people want to hear like catchy melodies and fun lyrics, and sometimes like I'll try to address things like sexism or racism or classism. Like our song Carried Away is like all about classism in America, and it's sort of wrapped in this more like fun sounding peppy package. And so we do get into that, but like and I think it's not so much that people don't want to hear my innermost horrible thoughts. It's mainly that I don't want people to hear them in that. Like they're not good songs. Like I write them and then I go like, wow, this sucks, and then I sort of move on.
I mean, it's hard for anybody to be super earnest, and it's hard to pour your heart out and not feel like you're getting too far into sort of like navel gazy emo territory.
Yeah. Although, man, 19-year-old me love to write songs just about all my heartache and problems and play them in front of people. I don't know why people would listen. My favorite was a song I wrote about how like hopeless I felt about my student debt, that had the lyrics, fuck you, fuck me, we all get fucked eventually. Always went over horribly at the bars we were playing. So
it seems like a pretty universal sentiment that I would assume people can get behind.
Well, I think sometimes when you see like a small, at the time I probably looked like I was like 15. You get there, you just start screaming, fuck you, fuck me. And I don't know, so into it.
It's probably a sense like what, if you're older in a bar and see a 19-year-old and of just like, what have you dealt with that you feel like you. And
I look back on me now and I go like, girl, buckle up. But hey, privilege, right?
We all get fucked. It does seem to, for a lot of us, tend to kind of snowball, I guess, a little bit as we continue to go through life, like a big Katamari Damacy, just picking up real shitty things.
Yeah. And then I look at my life and I'm like, you know what? Honestly, I don't really got much to complain about. So it's kind of pretty funny. So try to highlight the voices of those who are have real struggles.
How long have you been actually out there playing music?
I think I started, I was 18. So I started in like musical theater as a child. Then I became like
None of this surprises me at all yet.
then I became a child actor like in television and film. And then I think I quit when I was like 25. I did that for quite a while. And then
You're not acting anymore?
not really. I might go back to it someday, but it was taking up a lot of my time and mental energy. I just couldn't do it. I would look at my friends who are in the industry and they like love it. Like my friend Karen, who's in Chase Long Beach, like she loves being an actor. And I was like, wow, you love this. You know who doesn't love this that much? Me. I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this then. And what's funny is like when she was in Chase Long Beach, she was like having fun, but she was like, I really want to be an actor. And I was acting, being like, man, I really wish I could front a ska band. But I was in karate, my band Karate in the Garage from the time I was like 18 until I was maybe 25, 24, 25. And so that's what I was doing then. When I was 18, I learned to play the guitar and started that band. And then Bite Me Bambi, after I left that band, we started Bite Me Bambi.
What's your sense of why acting wasn't for you?
A couple of things. One, I think, is anxiety. I would get so anxious that I would do poorly on set. Something about all these people waiting on you and the money being spent, and I would just get like really anxious and I would screw up. I'd screw up a lot, and they'd have to do retakes for me and all this stuff. And so as much as I thought I wanted that, the pressure was just really hard. And then I started to think like, oh my gosh, what if I was like a series regular and I was the main character and I couldn't like produce, like it was just a lot. And also I think I loved, once I started playing music, I just loved it so much more. It's like everything I loved. It's like live performance and you get to sort of be yourself. And I guess maybe I'm just a big old ham, but I love telling my own story and things like that. And so as T-Bone always says, like there's people who are musicians and there's people who are like entertainers. Like I'm an entertainer. I'm in it for the claps, you know?
The anxiety thing is really interesting as far as acting goes, because I assume that every time they have to reset and do another take, it probably just spirals.
Yep. And the whole thing about like simple things like finding your mark and finding your light, and I'm trying to remember my lines because I'm nervous while I'm walking around. Like any scene where like we were doing dances, things like that I ensemble style, I was way better at. But yeah, every time I'd be like, cut. Okay, I remember when I was on Glee, it was like I kept screwing up and kept screwing up. And they actually took a break and did something else and had to come back to me. And I was like, wow, I suck at this. I'm so horrible. Like, and it just spirals out of control.
They must have seen something in you if you were getting jobs on network television.
Yeah, I don't think I was a bad actor. Like, I think I could do it. It was like, just couldn't get out of my own head to like, because auditioning I was good at. I mean, that's how I get the jobs because I did it so much. I mean, I auditioned like 5 days a week, several times a day. Like, it was like nonstop. And that I got used to. I didn't have the anxiety anymore in those rooms because I was used to it, or I knew the casting directors. It was, you know, I was more familiar. It was once we were on set and it's like all these people there and you're wasting money because you're wasting time. I'm like, ugh.
It sounds like it's something that you're kind of keeping in your back pocket. You said that it's something you might go back to at some point.
Maybe one day, because I did enjoy parts of it. I did really enjoy, and parts of it I do not miss. So I never say never, because if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So I never like to say like, oh, I'll never do that, because you never know.
If you truly hated it, though, it's not something that you would like have in your back pocket.
That's true. Well, and I think part of the things that made it more stressful was like money and time and just a lot of other things. But maybe when I'm like a little old lady, I'll be like, yeah, let's do it again. Call up my old peeps and be like, get me back in. you know?
Community theater is a thing that exists, but it doesn't seem like people really necessarily do acting as a hobby in the same way they do other art forms or creative pursuits, like, like music.
No, there are a lot of people who do. They just want to audition for little roles, or because that's the thing is like they're always pushing you, which is good. I mean, that's your manager's job is to push you for bigger and bigger roles. And I would get bigger and bigger agents until I was at like one of the top 4 agencies, and it's like they are like, "Hey, why aren't you booking the lead role and everything?" Where I'm like, "Can't I just go back to like when I had 2 lines and it was like low pressure?" But like nobody wants that because you're not making the money when you only say 2 lines. So there are people who they call them career co-stars. Like that's what they do, and they're fine with that. It's like people who are stay-at-home parents. They got their like baby with them at the audition or whatever. Like there's people who do that. Maybe instead of like gardening when I'm older, I'll just like be the where's the beef lady or something.
I hear you can just sort of you get one national commercial spot and you're good for a while. It sounds like
That's not true. That's not true.
Is that not true?
Well, depends on good for a while. I was in an Olympics commercial, so I guess it doesn't air long when you're in an Olympics commercial, but a Visa Olympics commercial for the Rio Olympics. And I was not good for a while. Though those stories are like when you're like, Flo from Progressive, yeah, you're good. Or, or ones that just get played over and over and over again. But the Olympics, it was like a finite amount of time they could run it because the Olympics were over. But yeah, it just depends. It depends, what they negotiate for you or whatever. I mean, it was a pretty good payday, but it didn't last me forever.
That sense of anxiety of, of sort of, I guess, like having a whole room full of people, not only just like staring at you, but in some ways, I guess, having their livelihood sort of depending on your ability to execute on your job. Is that not, you don't get a sense of that at all in being, not just being in a band, but being, kind of really the face and front person of a band?
I get nervous before shows, but not like debilitatingly so. And I think it's a confidence thing. Like I know when I go out there, like I can sing the songs, I know how to do the performance, like I can do that part. Whereas with film, I feel like I didn't have the confidence. So I would feel like I couldn't do it. And maybe it will all come tumbling down and they'll know that I'm not good and whatever. I think just, I don't know, from doing, well, I guess that's not true because I was going to say, I've been in bands for so long that I'm just used to it. But I was an actor longer and I never got used to it.
So one day you decide that you're not going out for auditions anymore. You're not doing that anymore. Do you just sort of, do you officially kind of quit that part of your life in order to pursue the next thing?
It sort of went in phases. My manager called and I was like crying and he was like, okay, why don't you take a break? Let's take a couple months off. And that's what they do. And so I was like, cool, okay. And then I was like, oh no, I'm never going back. And so then I called and it was like, oh, I was so sick. I did not want to tell them. And then I had really, really great managers and they were like, oh, we knew. That's why you stopped booking things because people can tell when you don't want the jobs. And I was like, oh, fair enough. They're like, we were just waiting for you to figure it out. And I was like, cool. And I was lucky too. My managers, they were like punk rockers, like the head honcho at the management company I was at, she used to tour manage for like Slayer. Like they were cool and they knew I really loved playing music. And so they weren't shitty about it. They were like, no, go play ska. Have a great time.
Because it's their job. They can't be the ones to tell you that you shouldn't be doing this.
There's a lot of coddling. I mean, believe me, Susan Ferris, man, she is a tough cookie. But when you're an actor, there's a lot of like, you're so great. Like that's their job. Like you're paying them to do that.
The experience on their end of calling somebody and they just start crying is probably not like super uncommon.
No, all the time. And it's like life problem. I mean, like Susan would get called to bail people out of jail and like, it's all when it's managers, like they manage your life. It's like they do it all. I'll never forget. I had a meeting I was getting a new agent and this was like the big time, right? I'm like meeting all these big agents and I was hung over because I played a show the night before. And I called Susan and I was like, please don't be mad at me. I'm so hungover. And I heard her go, hold on. And she goes, hey, Ashley, can you call over to such and tell them Tahlena has the flu? Yeah, she's not going to be able to make that meeting today. She does not feel well. And she goes, you get one. And then she hung up. And I was like, oh, you're the best. But like, that's the kind of stuff they would do, They wanted me to be happy.
Anybody who makes a career change like that, anybody who's been, whether or not you knew it was something that you didn't want to do, you were serious about it for a while, and you were actively pursuing it, and you were, as you said, going to five or however many auditions a week. So even if it's something that you came to the realization wasn't for you necessarily, it's still hard to quit something. It's still hard to quit something that you've invested so much of your life into regardless.
Yes. And a couple parts of it, like on one hand, it was hard because my family had sacrificed a lot to make it happen. Like I started when I was 15. My mom drove me to all the auditions, and she always says I'll never regret it because she loved all the time we spent together, which it's true. We have really good memories of, doing stuff in LA.
It's a nice mom thing to say.
It is, but they sacrificed a lot. And I mean, even with like singing, like they paid for all these voice lessons, like my parents just have always been my number one fans and cheerleaders. And so that I felt guilty in that sense. Like my uncle passed away and I could not be there to say goodbye to him because I was testing for a TV show. Like those were things I looked back and I was like, I wish I'd said goodbye to my uncle instead of testing for that TV show. But at the time, everybody was like, no, you got to stay. You got to do, my family was like, you should stay. And now I felt guilty quitting because of all those sacrifices. They seemed like they were for nothing, and the money spent and everything. And then on the other hand, losing your identity is very hard. Like the thing you use to describe yourself to people is difficult. And I was kind of lucky in that, like, I'm in this band with like Brian Mashburn and T-Bone Willie, and they had sort of at some point in their lives taken like day jobs after like leaving, say, Ferris. They were in these transitions. They've had to do that. And they were really helpful in giving me advice on what it's like to sort of be like, oh, this thing that I am not this anymore. And now I'm this other thing,
Beyond the sort of, very supportive thing that your mom said, what does your family say when you say, not only do I not want to act anymore, but I want to be a professional ska musician?
Not acting, they understood. But my mom was like, I wish you'd held a little longer. She always says that. She goes, I think you gave up a little too soon. Maybe if you take a little more of a break. Cause it's true. Like I was like very much on the like cusp of like, oh, it's about to happen. But I just like my managers had said, they were like, you're not booking cause they can tell you don't want to be there. They can sense it right when you walk in that room. And so I think
if you had gone from cusp to whatever comes next to cusp, you couldn't have quit. If you had broken through, it would have been so much harder to back away.
And I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to pull the ripcord, because I was afraid that I would not be able to carry a TV show or a movie. Like that's where we were at, like testing to be the leads on shows and the leads in movies. And
you also just can't quit. I mean, people have, but you can't quit when you're a lead at a TV show. Like,
no, yeah. Everyone's livelihoods are dependent on you. And like, I just think that's what part of why I was like, I got to get out of here. Like
the last exit on the freeway.
Yeah, kind of. And it would have been nice to sort of feel like, oh, it was all worth it, right? The sacrifice and stuff. But I think I'm much happier now that I'm not doing it. Because my life has like more structure and I have more control. If I want to go on vacation, I can. Like when you're an actor, you're not allowed to leave. You can't go anywhere. Or they make you work while you're on vacation. They make you, audition and send in tapes. And it's like always all the time. At least now I feel like I have a little more control over my life.
They're similar in that there are these sort of long stretches of downtime in both jobs.
But with music, you have I think there's things you can always be doing to keep yourself busy. In acting, it's a lot of waiting. Yeah, you can take acting classes and this and that. But with music, it's like, well, we always got to start working on that next album. Or there's merch orders to be shipped out. Or, now it's Twitch stream. I mean, I tell people I do Bite Me Bambi almost 7 days a week. Like it's all the time there's something to get done. So, sorry, not to bring it back, but I remember what you said. You were saying how my parents felt about me wanting to play ska music. They're ska fans, so they were very happy about that decision.
Maybe a better way of framing it is, of the two, of like being a professional actor or being a professional musician, which is sort of the more lofty dream.
Yeah, I get your point there. I guess for me, the difference, like personally was expectation. Like for acting, I was like, let's shoot for the stars. And like I know I play like a subculture style of music. Like I don't have any lofty like I'm gonna play stadium. Like, you know, I'm just happy to like have people who dig my music and get to play cool shows and do cool things, and I'm happy with that. So but I get your point of like telling somebody like, okay, I'm quitting being an actor to be a musician. They're like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Because you were set on this specific genre, you feel like that has gone a ways towards like tempering your ambitions, I guess, is a way of putting it.
Yeah, and also just like the way the music industry is today, like with the internet, like everything is niche. But in a way, I think that's cool. Like, because if you like ska music, like you can find us pretty easily because of the internet and niche subcultures and things. Like, it's, you know, we have fans all over the world where before maybe it wouldn't have been that way. But yeah, I read the NoFX book. What is it called? Hepatitis Bathtub. And I think it's Fat Mike who's saying like, oh yeah, I'm paraphrasing here, but like, oh, the bands that keep getting bigger and bigger, and then one day they have to step back and play 1,000-seater venue. Everybody notices, but if you just play 1,000-seater venues forever, nobody will notice if there's a decline or whatever. And I was like, it's the smartest thing I've ever heard. Like, just maintain and like things like Korn, right? Like Korn has all these really loyal fans because they put in the time to build the loyal fans. And so these people, when Korn fell out of like mainstream favor, people were still like, we still love you, you know, we want to support you. And so I think that's cool. That's a good place to be.
I mean, acting's not dissimilar from the standpoint of if you go from starring in a TV show to just having, or starring in a movie to having like one line on a TV show. Like people are also going to notice that decline.
Yes. The difference is, as an actor, you are still beholden to people giving you the job. You are still auditioning. If you're a musician, like I could literally book a show at a bar tomorrow and it won't matter if there's people there or if anybody likes it. Like I could do it for myself, and like I have the power to create those moments and the things to happen. Acting, you are beholden unless you're going to be like, I'm making my own short film. And a lot of people do that, and that's great, but like that is more rare. Like you're mostly just going to people going like, please give me this job, look how cool I am, or whatever. And you know, and it's up to them. And it could literally be like, oh, you're like 3 pounds too heavy. I remember being told I went vegan, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, and I remember them telling me like, oh, I lost weight. They go, oh, you're finally CW hot now, we can start sending you for CW shows. Like it's so much of like that, of like, you're too Asian, you are not Asian enough. You are like, there's so many variables that are just so difficult, and it all has to line up. In music, I can be like, hey, do you like this song I wrote? Cool, I'm going to play a show over here and whatever, you know?
You're right, obviously, in that, you know, you could just book a show at a bar tomorrow and, you know, people may show up or may not show up, but the math changes dramatically once you're like, all right, this is my thing that I'm doing. Like, this is my job now.
Yes, I feel like I should let you in on a little secret here. It's not my job. I mean, it's my job in that I spend a lot of time doing it. Like it's a job. It's not my job.
You had said day jobs before, it was a dirty word. So I was like, oh, she must be doing great.
No. So there's a little secret. I'm an accountant. So
as far as like day jobs go of being in a band, that's a really good one. Talk about something that bands need and don't have.
well, and I don't like calling it like a day job. Like I've realized I used to be like, oh, my real job is this, and then I play in the band. But honestly, like you put so much time and effort into like my band. Like it's a job. It's another job I have. I rent a ska band and I'm an accountant and I do whatever. You know what I mean? Like, but it's nice to have another job because then it gives more freedom and flexibility in the decisions that we make as a band. It's not so dire, or we can maybe take a gig where we're not making as much money, but it was like really cool or whatever, because there's more flexibility in that.
So are you just like first half of April, you're like, there's no touring?
Yeah, we don't really do anything January, February.
The entire lead up to.
We try to like stockpile songs, but yeah, it's a little slower there. But
how did you get into accounting?
Oh no, now we're gonna talk about this. Nobody wants to hear about this.
I'd love to talk about accounting. I'm like,
I don't talk about it much because I feel like it's just like whatever. But no, I don't know. I do bookkeeping, and a family friend did taxes, and she said, "If you love bookkeeping, you should do taxes." And
did you love bookkeeping?
yeah, I do. I'm an enrolled agent. Like I represent people before the IRS. Like it's all whatever. So
It would have been a very different conversation with, I assume, your parents and like everyone else in your life to say, I'm not acting anymore. I'm going to be in a ska band, and that is my full-time job.
well, at the time, I was not an accountant. So it
Okay, so that's a more recent occurrence.
yes. So it was more like that. I mean, they knew part of the reason I quit acting, honestly, was to find another job because I was tired of the stress of not knowing if I was going to have a paycheck. It was just a lot. And that was really one of the reasons why I quit was I was like, I have to find like another career to do. And the cool thing with music was I could keep doing it at the level that I wanted to, but still be able to like, I don't know, pay my rent, you know?
Do you manage the band's books?
We also have a member in our band that is like a vice president of a bank. So
Okay.
we're pretty rock solid on the financials.
There's definitely a benefit of starting this band with people who have very much been through the ringer before, like have very much like seen everything, and you know, like certainly in the case of, you know, say Ferris, the heights of this specific genre, and then everything that came after. I mean, it must be useful to have that perspective around you.
Yeah, it really is, and it's helpful in a lot of ways. Like I've just learned a lot, especially from Brian Mashburn, just like in songwriting and whatnot. And I've learned a lot about the business from like two different sides. Like say Ferris, you know, they were like mainstream success, and then our keyboard player Mike was in My Superhero, which they didn't reach those heights, but they were still like hustling during the 90s and playing lots of shows and touring and getting a lot of accolades. They just didn't have like the big Sony budget. And so I've learned a lot from like both of those perspectives of like the best way to do things, and they just have a lot of knowledge about those things, which is cool. And yeah, the perspective of like, you know, when everybody always goes like, do you think ska is going to get mainstream again? I go like, it doesn't matter, because for those of us who play it, we're playing it because we love it. Like you wouldn't play it if you didn't like it. Like there's no reason to. And also like if it does become mainstream again, 6 bands are going to get record deals, whatever a record deal means anymore. And then it's gone.
6 bands get record deals, and like 1 or 2 of them are actually bona fide success stories.
Exactly. And then it's as quickly as it began, it's gone. And you have to make wise choices during the times where it's happening to sort of set yourself up for when it's not anymore, you know?
It would be great to do this for a living for a while, and obviously you want to get yourselves out there in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah, I would I wouldn't turn down if they were like, okay, we're like going on this big tour and it's happening. Like, yeah, of course. And then I'm lucky in that the job I do is like there's like a fair amount of flexibility in it. So, but yeah, I would go do it because I always say like I want to do like one really good tour, like to have the experience, because a lot of my bandmates have had those experiences and I haven't, and so I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to like have that one experience, and then sort of like after that, if it happens, it happens. It doesn't, it doesn't.
Specifically with people who have been like doing this for like 25, 30 years, the fact that they keep coming back to it is because it's something that they just really enjoy doing. I don't think anybody else in the band probably is doing it because they think it's going to make them, you know, the next rock star.
No, that's for sure. And I feel like that's like in a lot of interviews I do, like that's a big question. It's like, oh, you think ska is making a comeback or whatever? And I'm like, in the reality of it, I feel like the people who play this genre of music, we don't talk about that much, honestly. We're just like doing what we love, and it's cool that people are enjoying it. And there's been a lot of like buzz and press lately of like, oh, is ska making a comeback or whatever, and this and that, and like, you know, bigger artists, pop artists, mainstream artists have like ska influence in the music and whatnot. But I'm like, does that really matter? Like, it's cool, good for them. But, I'm just trying to focus on what I can control, and I can control like the music I put out and how I make people feel, and the show we put on.
This must be something that you're attuned to as somebody who is both in a ska band and who is an accountant. But I always think of that Onion. You remember that Onion story of something like ska bands outnumbers audience?
Yeah. Yep. Aaron Barrett said in the ska movie, anything divided by 10 is zero.
Again, they're like very like pragmatic, practical concerns of touring in a band with a horn section.
Yeah. It's not cheap to have everybody. And I always joke, like, if I wanted to make money, I'd play in a 4-piece band, like, or whatever. But I'm having a good time. And like I said, there's flexibility and, like, having other sources of revenue, and being able to, you know, pick and choose things you want to do because of that.
Are you ramping up to full touring at some point in the near future?
Yeah, we've got it's hard, like you said, with so many people, like scheduling is hard.
And families and children now.
Yeah, that's another thing. So it has to be sort of like the right package at the right time. But I think you will be seeing us going out more out of town, even if it's just things that are like drivable for us in Southern California. We are flying and doing some fly out shows and stuff too. So we're definitely going to be getting out of town more that COVID is over. But for us to be like, let's get a van and hit the road, like, I don't know, it have to be like pretty good circumstances and everything sort of lining up correctly.
To name your EP Hurry Up and Wait, as the band was ramping up the way it was, how much is this just completely taking the wind out of your sails?
Not totally. I mean, yes, to do the Aquabats Real Big Fish tour, that would have been awesome. To do like we had other tours. We had Europe, we had Australia, we had these things that were in the works, and it felt like we were like building up, and it did take it out a little bit, but I think I'm very grateful that we were able to keep doing like music videos, Twitch, keep in contact with people, stay on people's minds, things like that. I think that was very helpful. And so I'm hoping maybe those opportunities still sort of roll in as time goes on. I just have to keep the faith.